Some people coming in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Freeman. I work with the plan, and today we're hosting the Library Leadership Essentials, Leadership versus Management, presented by Eddy Smith. And we're going to get everything going here pretty shortly. And I wanted to thank I wanted to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for allowing us to do this presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eddy Smith.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am Eddy Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Abilene Library Consortium and the founder of Tharseo Group, which is a consulting facilitation group that works with organizations. Hi, Paige. I see you there at DeLeon. I almost included a picture of the DeLeon Library. I wish I had now. Today we're going to talk about a topic that I thought would be just super easy, but as I got putting this presentation together, it turns out there's a lot more to say here than I thought I was going to have at the beginning. And so today we're going to spend an hour, maybe a little more, discussing this topic, and then we'll have time for lots of questions and dialogue. I'm going to ask you to engage as we go along, so you can feel free to jump in on the chat, or you can just turn on your camera and ask a question. Feel free to interrupt me. That's fine. And so we're going to talk about leadership versus management, which makes it sound like it's a face-off. Are you ready to rumble? Okay. Well, for most of you, you're in small or smaller libraries, maybe in small communities, rural areas, and so I'm kind of focused on those areas. I see some of you are from bigger libraries, but I think what we're going to talk about is applicable no matter where you are. But most of my examples are small libraries. So, okay, I know that lots of you you just juggle dozens of roles every day, especially if you're in a small library. You might be a staff of one, and so everything gets done by you, whether it's ordering the books, fixing the fax machine, and yes, that's still a thing, and running summer reading programs, maybe even mopping the floor. But so we don't always have the luxury of big teams and extra hands in small libraries, and that's why today's topic of leadership versus management is really so important. So we're going to talk about what those words really mean. We're going to talk about how they show up in our sort of daily work, how to build both skill sets. So even when time and resources are tight, you can still grow in both of those areas. And my goal today is to kind of help you walk away with, feeling more clear and confident, maybe, and a little bit more energized about the important role that you play in whatever size library you are in. So let's start with some basic definitions. So before we go any further, what exactly do we mean when we say leadership and management? And because I think really understanding the difference is really the foundation for really everything else we're going to talk about today. So, and the differences might actually be simpler than you think they might be. So, management is about organizing and maintaining and getting things done. It's very present focus. It asks, questions like, how do we keep things running smoothly? How do we be effective today? That's the domain of management. Leadership is all about lifting people up. And I have to confess, I'm a Star Wars nerd, so I had to include a little tongue in cheek, but you all, I hope, will appreciate my humor. Leadership is really about setting direction, inspiring people. And yes, it is about lifting people up, but not quite in the Darth Vader way. It's about creating positive change. If management is present looking, leadership is forward looking. It really sort of asks bigger picture questions like, where are we going? Why does it matter? The truth is both are essential. A library without management might have great ideas, but then struggles with execution or struggles with follow through. A library without leadership might be very efficient and very effective in operations day in and day out, but never really moves forward or adapts or changes, which, we could generically, professionally apply to our profession. We struggle with sort of moving forward and finding forward-looking perspectives. We're really good at managing things. We're really good at managing our collections. We're really good at managing our workflows and managing our patrons and so forth. So hence the difference and why we're talking about those things today. Okay, so now that we've sort of talked about some definitions, let's kind of unpack some common myths, because I think these understandings can really, or misunderstandings maybe I should say, these can really sort of impede us in how we discuss and think about leadership and management. So the first myth that I want to bust, anybody a Mythbusters fan out there? Still a Mythbusters fan all these years later. Okay. The first really big myth is that leadership is about charisma and management is about control. And that's not really true. The truth is leadership isn't about personality. It's really more about purpose. So you don't have to be loud or extroverted or have a fancy title to be a strong leader. It really is about being focused on purpose. Why are we here? Some of the things that we talked about last week when we talked about strategic planning. What's our why? Those are leader kinds of questions. And then management isn't about controlling people. It's about creating structure and clarity so that everyone involved can be doing their best work. It really is about sort of creating a framework in which people can work at their best. Okay, so that's the first myth. Second myth, you're either a leader or you are a manager. Nope. Most of us, especially in small libraries, actually are constantly switching between both roles. So, one moment you're setting long-term goals, or maybe planning your budget for next year or in the future, and the next minute you're making sure that story time is staffed. And you don't have to choose. That's the myth. The myth is that you have to choose one or the other, and that's not true. You need both. And in fact, in a small library, especially if you're the only one there, you actually have to be both. And so total myth that you have to be one or the other, or you get to choose to be one or the other. You really don't get that choice. Myth number 3 is that leadership is big picture and theoretical, and management is practical. And I would say, actually, leadership really needs to be practical. And we talked about some of that last week when we talked about strategic planning. That strategic planning has to be practical in that it must lead to actionable things that can be done and things that can change. Otherwise, it's just fantasy. And so leadership is big picture, I will say that, but it's not theoretical. It's about making a vision real. It's about shaping the vision, understanding the vision, bringing clarity to the vision, and then making that real and moving people and ideas and the organization forward in ways that work. On the flip side, management isn't just practical. Management often requires creativity and problem solving. It's not just a function of a series of protocols or checklists. Although you can do well with a lot of management by following procedures and checklists. But it really does require you to have some problem solving skills because you're always going to encounter things that aren't on the checklist. Okay, so there's some busted myth. I should have included the Mythbuster theme song or something. Okay, I want to take a closer look at how leadership and management actually differ in practice. This slide has a lot of detail, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but I will tell you this is a good point to insert that. I will send out these slides so you don't have to try to capture this. But if you Google leadership versus management, you will get 10,000 pictures of basically Venn diagrams where leadership is on one side, management's on the other, and there's a little bit of overlap between them where they both involve both. I found this image, and I thought it was really a brilliant interpretation of it, and that is management is in essence a kind of subset of the things that leaders do. Leadership is about setting direction, it's about change, it's about growth, it's about asking where are we headed. And then management, as a sort of subset of that, is about maintaining stability. It's all about structure and systems and basically asking, how do we keep things running smoothly? There are some contrasts. Leadership is sort of vision driven, right? It's focusing on what could be, it focuses on the future. Management is more task driven or operationally driven. It focuses on the present. It focuses more on what needs to be done today. And there's a lot of nuance we'll tease out. Obviously, from this chart, the essence here is that there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of interaction between these things. And the truth is, if you're a small library staff, you might be the only person. You're the library director. You're actually doing both of these things all the time. But a good way to sort of think about it is that leaders influence people. It inspires and motivates and builds trust. Management is about coordinating processes. It plans and tracks and troubleshoots those kinds of approaches. So philosophically, we're kind of in the abstract at this moment, but I'll give you some practical here in a second. But leadership is really about people. That's one of the things. I don't know if it comes through on the slide, but there's a little shadow of in the blue circle of the white letters that say people, and then there's a little shadow of in the red circle that says things. Right? Generally, leadership is about influencing people. Obviously, if you're a leader, you're leading someone. Management is mostly about managing the stuff, the operation itself. So leadership often involves risk and change, and stepping into the unknown. Management is often about consistency and procedure and following and keeping control of situations, avoiding surprises, solving problems efficiently. Neither is better than the other. They're just different. As I've already mentioned, in small libraries, you're doing both of these sometimes within the same hour. But I really do like this chart compared to the Venn diagram that sets the two apart. I really like thinking about management as a subset to leadership, which I think it really is, because you really can't lead without doing some management or having people who manage for you. Management, mostly about things. Leadership, mostly about people. And I also like this because it really fits my personal definition of leadership. And there's 1,000 definitions of leadership, but I have one that I personally adhere to. And that is, leadership is about creating environments where other people can be successful. Leadership is about creating environments where other people can be successful. And management is also about that. That's why I liked this concept of management as a subset, because management is about creating or maintaining or sustaining environments where other people can be successful. Okay, there's a lot of detail on that slide. I won't read it to you. You're welcome. Okay, let's shift gears here a little bit and get a little interactive and see if you all had your coffee this morning. We've talked about the definitions, sort of the differences between leadership and management. But in real life, those roles don't always show up with labels. So especially in small libraries, situations can be complex. They are often fast moving. And so I'm going to walk you through a few real world scenarios. And for each one, I want you to think about it and decide, is this an example of leadership or is it an example of management? So think about what's happening as I go through each of these and what kind of decisions are being made, what skills are being used, and then kind of, make a decision about which is it, leadership or management. And you can throw your results in the chat, or maybe we could do it with thumbs up emojis or something. We'll figure this out as we go. Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. Yeah, feel free to use the chat. And chime in on whether you think the first scenario here is leadership or management. Okay, so scenario number one. So here's the scenario. Your library is invited to partner with a local food pantry to provide pop-up services during distribution days for the pantry. So this is a new idea for you and your library. You have concerns about staff time and setup. Is this leadership or is it management? Oh, Vaughn, right out of the box, right out of the gate, Vaughn, management. Oh, interesting. Okay. Lots of people putting management. Well, it's a bit of a trick scenario because I would say it's actually both. Thanks, Pete. Okay. Yeah, it can be both, right? The leadership part of this is envisioning a new way to sort of serve the community. Leadership is often the component in sort of building external partnerships. And so that side of this scenario has a lot of leadership components. But the concerns there at the end of the scenario that I mentioned, staff time, setup, those all are management kinds of things, right? Assessing capacity, scheduling staff, handling the logistics to make it happen. Those are all sort of management, operational kinds of mindsets. So, but the situation itself, the scenario itself really does require some strategic thinking and some operational execution. Okay, next scenario. Here we have a staff conflict. So you have two team members who are having ongoing communication issues. They're affecting morale, and you step in to mediate and set expectations and follow up with individual check-ins and courses of action. Is that leadership or is it management? So I got mixed responses there. I got some leadership, I got some management. Justin just shot down the middle of the road with both. I would say it's both. Part of that is, obviously the management part of it is addressing performance concerns and, ensuring follow-throughs and having courses of action and individual check-ins. That's all about managing people's performance and people's interactions. But the leadership part of that is really about fostering a culture, fostering respectful team members as part of the culture of the organization, modeling emotional intelligence. Those are all sort of on the leadership side of the operation. And so really, in any scenario that involves overseeing people, managing staff, managing volunteers, etc., anytime you're addressing conflict, really effectively requires both sort of people-centered leadership skills and some very clear managerial actions. And those of you who have had personnel interactions in the past, whether you were the recipient of that or the supervisor of those things, you know that it actually does involve both. So you having to have really be very people-centric, and remember, create an environment where other people can be successful. And then at the same time, being very clear on the managerial side, what are the expectations? What are the follow-up actions required? Having that clarity of the management side of the engagement is crucial to the success if you want that person to really improve their performance and be better and the situation to be improved and morale impacted, etc. Okay. Scenario number 3. Something that's a little, apropos. You're getting ready for the annual summer reading program. I'm sure at this point you've already launched it. Hopefully you are ready. It's happening. And so you create, detailed schedules, you assign roles, you order materials, but you're also introducing a new sort of theme focused on lifelong learning in your community, something that you've never touched on before. Is this leadership or is it management? A couple of you chimed in there early. Be management, but can also be some leadership. Yvonne, both. Hurley, both. Yeah, see, y'all are catching on to me. Yes, it can be both. Right? Obviously, coordinating timelines and organizing tasks and managing resources, that all falls easily in the purview of management. You want to just, because you're asking the question, how do we make this thing go smoothly? How do we be prepared? How do we, prepare for contingencies? Those are all management-focused activities. But then the part about bringing a new vision, the part about aligning and motivating your team and aligning the program with the values of the community, that's all bigger picture sort of leadership. So even this thing that we just do every year, we crank it out. It's a ton of work. It's a big, heavy lift. We all know it, but it actually does involve both. There's some leadership aspects of it. Even if you're doing a summer reading program that you're not developing a new theme for it, you're just using the state library's theme or whatever. You still have to rally people. You still have to align their efforts. You have to get people motivated. You have to get your team motivated, get your volunteers motivated, and get your patrons motivated to participate and read. That's all leadership. And then, as everybody who's ever done a summer reading program knows, it's a ton of management. It's an ongoing management and organizational challenge day in and day out. So it's both. All three were both, which really leaned into my point, which is you really can't separate these things. We jokingly called this session leadership versus management, but there is no versus. It should be leadership and management. This is not an either or. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not either leadership or management. It's actually both. And yes, Yvonne, I was being tricky. So you're welcome. Okay. So let's talk real world here. So obviously those scenarios are fabricated, but they're not far off from kind of where our world is day in and day out. What does leadership and management actually look like in small libraries? And so here's some small libraries pictured here. I want to be honest. If you're in a small library, you're probably doing everything. You're the Justin. Yes, that's Hillsborough down there. So the libraries there are Cross Plains up in the upper left corner. The bottom left corner is Post, a little tiny library that's snuck in between two buildings in the little town of Post. The upper right is Sterling City, Sterling County Public Library, and then the bottom right is Hillsborough. And then the middle picture is the little library in Valentine, Texas. So, okay, so you're doing everything if you're in a small library. or maybe you just have, a small staff of, 2 or 3 people or 2 or 3 volunteers. You're doing everything. You're the strategic planner and you're the person who plunges the toilet. I mean, the reality is you in a small library, you're managing every day and you're leading every day. So, you might be leading a vision session 1 minute or talking about how to drive the library forward with the city manager or the county commissioner. And then the next minute, you're trying to figure out why the Wi-Fi is down, right? That's real life. And it really makes balancing leadership and management even more challenging, right? Because we live in, and even if you have a sizable staff in a sizable library, you still have these common realities. We all have these common realities. Yes, Justin, yes, we've all plunged the toilets. Yes, that's such truth. So here's the common realities that we all live in. Even if you are Dallas Public, you still have this common reality, which is you have limited staff and limited resources. You don't always have the people and the time to delegate to, and you don't always have the capacity to take on what you want to do, right? That means you may want to lead your organization strategically, but you're often pulled into the emergency, immediate task. The toilet's overflowing. We have to deal with that now. It didn't matter what we wanted to plan for today strategically. The reality is we've got this thing happening, right? You're probably wearing many hats, as most small library directors and staff, right? You're juggling programming, you're juggling budgeting, you're juggling sometimes tech support. You might be the IT person, not just for the library, but you might be the IT person for the whole city because you're the only one who knows anything about IT, right? The boundaries between leadership and management, particularly in small libraries, can get very blurry very quickly. And that's just a reality that we live in. And another reality that we all deal with, no matter what size library we come from, is that we all have ties to our community. And in smaller towns, it's really strong. Those relationships run real deep. And that's a huge strength, right? But it can also make hard leadership decisions like letting somebody go or setting boundaries even more emotionally complicated. So I would say all libraries have strong ties to the communities if they're effective in any way, but the smaller the community, the harder those leadership decisions can be because of the depth of those relationships in a small community. And I've worked with lots of libraries where the library's director is related to the mayor, and so it gets complicated about how you execute in the face of those relationships, and that can require some savvy, some political nuance, and some emotional awareness. And then the other thing that we all share, and this is true no matter what size library you are or where you are, but it's especially true if you're on the western side of the state, and that is we can be very isolated. Right? You may not have a peer team to bounce ideas off of. And so it's very easy to feel stuck in our daily grind or, unsure that we're making the right sort of long-term decision. And I would say that isolation, that professional isolation is true no matter where you are, but especially true on the western side of the state. And so that requires you to invest in some groups like Plan, where you can connect with other libraries across the state and bounce ideas off of. But I also think even in a huge library in the middle of the Metroplex, you can feel very isolated in that you can get very focused on just your library and what you're doing today and not put that in the context of what the community needs and what is happening around you and what's happening across the state and what's happening politically, et cetera. So that isolation, I think, at varying levels, we all sort of share that. Okay, but here's the good news. And all those realities that I just talked about can also really lead to some very powerful opportunities for you to lead with authenticity and make impact and model what it looks like to care deeply about people who work for you, people in the community, and to lead well, even acknowledging that all of that means that sometimes it's just very messy. Management always wants to make things smooth and avoid messes. Leadership wades into fearlessly at times into messiness. And so you really need both. You need both to sort of counterbalance each other. And so let's talk about that. How do we balance leadership and management? Well, if you're especially in small libraries where you don't have layers of staff and lots of margin, it's easy to get stuck in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture. You might have big ideas, new services, deeper outreach, whatever long-term plans, but you're constantly getting sucked into, fixing the copier and just the day in and day out things that need to be done. And so last week in our strategic planning basics session, we talked about this matrix. So this is the time management matrix. It's divided into 4 quadrants based on, in essence, urgency and importance. I won't go into detail about this. You can rewatch last week's session where we talked about it. But I want to give you a tool that will help you sort of make decisions. And it's based on this matrix. So it's called the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. It will help you sort your tasks that you're confronted with day in and day out into 4 simple categories and then take action on them. And the key is these 4 Ds: to do, to decide, to delegate, or I would include defer, or delete. And so it's based on that matrix of urgent versus important. And so if something is in the upper left corner, the green square there, or rectangle, I guess, if it's urgent and important, then do it. Do it now. These are crisis things. The toilet's overflowing. You got to deal with that now, right? They demand immediate action. And there's really not much you can do to prepare for those things other than when they happen, you can be in a mindset that says, okay, this is urgent and it's important, but I need to not freak out. I can deal with urgent and important things, even when they're careening into my day that I didn't plan on at all. And then for the important but not urgent, and when we talked about strategic planning last week, so this is the upper right rectangle, the sort of aquamarine color. Somebody confirm that color is right because I'm colorblind. So, okay, thanks, Bob. So these are sort of long-term things. These are the things you plan for, right? And we talked about this last week. The trouble with the things that fall into that box are that they're not urgent, but they're hugely important. And so the way to handle those, just as we talked about strategic planning, is to actually schedule a time to do them. And so you decide on a time to do this. This is where real impact happens, right? Things that fall into this category are the stuff that changes your reality, that change your world. This is about long-term planning, or how we build a new building, or these are the things that fall into that category. But it's often the very first things that get pushed aside because of time crunch. And so the best way to sort of manage those things is to decide on a time when that can be dealt with. Okay, let's talk about the bottom left square, the red square. These are urgent but not important. These are interruptions. These are emails. These are things that feel urgent but don't really move the mission of the organization forward. And so I would say the best thing to do here is to delegate those things. If you're the organizational leader, the library director, can you delegate this? Can you hand it off to someone else? I sometimes ask myself, am I the right person to be doing this particular thing? And if the answer to that is no, or sometimes my answer is, in a small organization is, well, yes, but I'm a very expensive, bookkeeper or whatever. Can they be delegated to someone else? Or if you can't delegate, or you're in a library of one, and you can't delegate, you don't have anyone else to delegate to, can you defer them? They're not important. They feel urgent, but I think if you really break them down, they don't have an urgency. The only thing that makes them feel urgent is they've interrupted. And so just because of their sort of volume, they feel urgent, but they're really not important. Can they be deferred? Can I postpone that? Can I not answer emails every second that I receive them? Can I wait until the end of day and then respond to emails at the end of the day? Right? Those are good ways to sort of delegate or defer if you don't have anyone to delegate to. Those things that fall into that category. And then the last box down in the bottom right is not urgent and not important. Those are just busy work. They're just distractions. They're just things that don't add value. Delete those things. So the key, I think, in all of this is to help protect the time that's up in that second quadrant of the important and not urgent. That's where leadership lives. If you wait until it becomes urgent, you've lost your ability to sort of lead proactively on those things. So think about your own sort of week. How much time is spent putting out fires? What's one small step you could sort of take to carve out time for forward thinking and people building or vision setting? Some things to just ponder as you think about where does most of my work fall? You could even, take a day or two and just kind of put a tick mark in each quadrant as you spend your day. Like, how much of my day was spent doing things that really were not urgent and not important? How much of my day was spent doing things that really I could have delegated to someone? How much of my day was really spent on just emergencies, and how can I plan better so that I have more margin to accommodate the emergencies? Because obviously you can't always plan for the emergency. Years ago, I worked at an organization some of you may know called Amigos, and we did training on disaster preparedness, disaster response preparedness. And we used to call the class disaster preparedness, and that was always funny because you can't prepare for the disaster. What you need to do is prepare for the response to the disaster. And so how do we move things out of the urgent? You can't always do that because that's what makes them urgent and important, but you can make time to prepare for your response to those things. And the big way to sort of manage that and lead it yourself in those things and lead your teams into those things is to really have enough margin to accommodate, right? As I used to tell my kids when they first started learning how to drive, if you are always getting to wherever you want to go precisely at the minute that you need to be there, you've not left yourself enough time to have a flat tire. And so how do you put in enough margin so that something, unexpected and urgent and important can happen without derailing your whole plan? Okay, I probably talked about that for far longer than I probably needed to, but those 4 Ds really helpful to sort of think about, can I put all of my work day in and day out into one of those 4 Ds? Okay, let's talk a little bit now about leading at every level. Maybe you're not the director in title. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about leadership is that it's only for people with a title. It's only for the library director, or it's only for the city manager, or it's only for the county commissioners. The truth is, leadership is not a position. It really is a mindset. And so no matter your role, you have the ability to lead by your actions, by your attitude, and most importantly, by your influence, because a lot of leadership really boils down to influence. So in small libraries, this is especially important because everyone matters. Everyone sets the tone. And sometimes the most influential leaders are the ones who quietly show up with consistency and creativity and care. Um, and so what does it look like to lead even when you don't have the title to lead? Let's talk about that a little bit. Excuse me. Okay, so what does it look like to lead at every level? Well, I would say the first thing, if you're not at the director level, is to really take initiative, right? Maybe you notice that, I don't know, story time attendance is dropping. And so you come up with a new format or a different way to promote it. That's leadership. You may not think of that as leadership, but that's actually leadership. So you're stepping in to improve something that matters. Now, don't get carried away with initiative, right? You can't just take initiative where you don't have authority. And so that's a balance. But you can take the initiative by presenting the idea. And we can talk more in a little bit about just the nuance of that. I've seen a lot of mid-level people or low-level frontline people feel like their ideas are squelched because they take the initiative, they come up with the idea, but then that idea isn't adopted. That's a different issue that doesn't have anything to do with you taking the initiative. That has to do with you understanding that not every idea that comes up is going to be adopted, right? And so that's a skill that you have to learn. But taking the initiative in general, a really good way to sort of demonstrate and practice leadership if you're not in charge. The other is, and this is true even if you are in charge, model the culture you want, right? This is, in essence, the famous quote by Gandhi, right? Be the change you want to see in the world. And so, for example, if you stay calm when the internet is down, if you greet patrons with kindness, if you avoid gossiping with everybody who comes through the door, even when it's tempting and you know everybody in the community, that's leadership. You're actually shaping the emotional tone of your team, and you're shaping the emotional atmosphere of the space that you're in. And so model the culture you want. Another great way to demonstrate leadership at whatever level you are is in support of others, right? So maybe there's a new volunteer who's overwhelmed learning the circulation software, and you offer once again to walk them through how to do it for the 500th time, right? But you do it without judgment. That's leadership. You're building someone else's confidence and capacity. You're increasing their ability to succeed. And leadership is all about creating environments where other people can be successful. So supporting others, huge aspect of leadership. Even if you're not in charge, you can do that. And then I would say, and I'm preaching to the choir here, obviously, but be a learner. And, in our library world, maybe you didn't grow up using e-resources, but you attend a webinar and then you practice those things, and then you start recommending them to patrons. That's leadership, right? You're growing professionally so that your community can grow too in the same ways. And so always be a learner. Again, I'm preaching to the choir because you all wouldn't be in a session like this if you weren't learners. At least I hope that you wouldn't be here. Maybe you just don't have anything else to do on a Wednesday. Your toilets haven't overflowed enough. And so you're just killing time on this session. But hopefully you all are learners. And the most of you that I know, you really are. Good leaders always want to learn more about how to lead well. And I would say, just in my own professional opinion, my own experience, as soon as you encounter a leader who says, I've got this figured out, I know how to lead, that's not a person you want to follow. You want someone who leads with humility, who says, I don't know all the answers, and I don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but I know how to learn how to do this better, and I want to continually learn. That is a common trait among great leaders, I believe. That leadership isn't really about being in charge. It's about showing the way, and doing that by how you show up every day. It's about creating environments where other people can be successful. And so, speaking of other people, if you supervise other people, you have staff, you have volunteers, etc., you oversee other people's work. There's probably some nuance here we probably need to talk about, and we need to probably tease out, because I think it would be very effective if everybody who supervises people knew these distinctions. So we'll tease this out. So when it comes to supervising other people, there are three distinct roles that we play as leaders. We play the coach, we play the mentor, and we play the manager. And so let's define each of these further and kind of talk about them in some nuanced detail, because we have complex interactions with each other as we supervise people. And sometimes we're wearing one of these hats, and sometimes we're wearing a different hat. And that can be misperceived by the person that we're supervising. So I want to kind of tease this out a little bit. I feel like this is worth spending a couple of minutes talking about. Okay, so first is the coach. What's a coach? Any of you who've ever, been a coach, a sports coach, or played sports where you were coached well? Coaching is all about maximizing the individual, or in the case of a team, the team's potential. Coaching is all about maximizing. Specifically, doing that using proven strategies that work. So if you have a baseball coach, and every time you step up to the plate, he gives you pointers about how to hold the bat, how to shift your grip, how to stand up straight and shift your weight down onto your knees. Those are all proven strategies that make you hit better. And so coaching is about using those proven strategies or concepts or techniques to develop your talent from good to great, right? And the goal of coaching is what? Somebody put the goal of coaching in the chat box. To guide, yes. What's the goal of the team? To motivate, yes. To win, thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, the goal of coaching is to make the team better so that they win, right? It's about maximizing either your individual potential as a player or as an individual performer, or maximizing the team potential, right? And the same as if you have a vocal coach, if you have a music teacher, etc. They're coaching you using proven techniques, proven strategies to develop your talent from good to great so that you win. That's the intent of coaching. Many of us have been coached over the years in our lifetimes, and we may have been coached well and we may not have been coached well, but the best coaches are really all about how do we take your performance today, how do we maximize that to the maximum potential it has, and we do that in proven ways using techniques that we know work. That's what coaches do. And so if you're supervising people, a lot of times you have to coach them. You have to use proven techniques, right? This is why we catalog things in the way we catalog things. This is why we put labels on things the way we put labels on things. This is so they look good on the shelf. This is why we only fill the shelves, 75, 80% full, and we leave space. Those are all proven techniques that work in the libraries. And so as a coach, you're helping the people you're supervising understand how to maximize the potential of the team, the potential of the organization, etc. Because the goal is to win. Okay. Well, what is mentoring? Mentoring has a goal to develop you as the mentee. The goal of mentoring is about imparting wisdom and experience. And so if you are a mentor or you've ever been mentored by someone, this is about gleaning from other people's experience and other people's wisdom. And it's really based on esteem, mutual respect, and admiration. So it's impossible for you to mentor someone if they don't respect you. And it's impossible for you to be mentored by someone if you don't admire that person in some way, right? And But the goal of it isn't about your performance. The goal of it is about fully developing you as a human being, as a person, as a professional. It's about the growth of the individual and encouraging that growth. How to be the best you that you can be. Not achieving some external goal like to win the game or, play the flute better or operate the library better, but to actually just be a better person. And so how do we develop you into the best you? That's the goal of mentoring. And it really is about encouraging growth. Now that can be tied to personal performance, of course, but it really is about how do you grow as a person, as a professional, and that's where mentoring is really helpful, but it really is based on that mutuality of respect. If you don't have that respect, you can't be a mentor. And then finally, what is a manager? What's the goal of a manager? Anybody know? Throw it in the chat if you think you know. The manager always has the goal of the organization in mind. A manager is always mindful about getting work done. In essence, it really is command and control of, not control in a negative sense, but think of it like a traffic cop, right? Making sure that things are flowing. That's what a manager does. It's about getting work done. It's about being good at planning and organizing and executing. Yes, Hurley, there, seeing that things run smoothly. I think it's all about, the goal of managing is all about organizational results, right? The goal of coaching is about improving individual or team performance. The goal of mentoring is about improving the individual, developing the individual to their maximum capacity. Managing is all about organizational results. And this is where it gets a little dicey for those of us who are leaders and also coaches and also mentors. If you're a coach and a mentor to the people you manage, it can be a little confusing about which one are you supposed to choose? Well, the answer is not an either or, it's a yes and. But I want to talk for just a second about how these three things work together. And there are times when they don't. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this in your life, but if you've ever had a mentor who was also your manager, and then you had to have some disciplinary thing or some managerial decision that was about organizational results and not about you, but you wrestled with the fact that my mentor is telling me that I'm not doing a good job, but as my mentor, they're supposed to be developing me. But they're wearing their manager hat. And so this is where, if you ever coach and manage people or you're mentoring your staff, there can be inherent conflicts of interest in each of these roles. And so I think there's great value in you as a leader making sure that you are absolutely clear with people about, hey, I need to talk with you not as your mentor, I need to talk with you as the manager of this organization. And in order to keep the organizational result high, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. That doesn't have anything to do with who you are. And I still think you're an amazing person and you're developing and you're learning and you're growing as a professional, but I've got to accomplish X. Can you help me do that? Being clear about that, of which hat you're wearing, will help alleviate a lot of confusion. Where I've seen this really be negatively impactful is in an environment where, like a church, where the staff of the church, the leader of the church is a pastor, and so the leader is also their manager, may also be their mentor, may also be their coach, and then additionally there's a fourth layer that also happens to be their pastor, has this sort of pastoral oversight. And if you don't understand which hat the leader is wearing when they come and address something with you, it can be very disorienting. And so as a leader, I try to be very careful about, am I bringing this comment as a manager? And I will preface that with, hey, I need to put on my manager hat for a minute because we've got to do better with X, Y, and Z. Or am I putting on my mentor hat and say, hey, I think I see a skill set in you that you haven't really fully developed. Let's see if you're interested in that. We can help you develop that. Or am I putting on the coach hat and saying, all right, team, here's a way that we can improve our performance tomorrow over what we did today. So those are all nuanced. They all blur together. They all blur. They all get really fuzzy. And that's where it can be really crushing to someone that you're overseeing, you're supervising. If you're making comments to them as a manager and they think you're coming to them as a mentor, you've just literally sucked the life out of them. And so be careful with that. Recognize that there are very blurry edges around those things. And so be clear about how you're addressing it. The real challenge here is it's a very tricky balance. And there is sometimes confusion, but the more clear you can be, the better. And as Brene Brown often says, clear is kind. Clarity is kindness. And so if you can be clear about how you're engaging with the people you're supervising, that is a kindness. It's a kindness to them, and it's a kindness to yourself, because that stuff doesn't blow back later. Okay, so anyone had experience with that that you want to, maybe share a moment of vulnerability, speaking of Brene Brown? Anybody want to chime in on that? Feel free. While I take a drink. Okay. I do want to touch on one other area of sort of supervising other people, and it has to do with delegation. And so I found this great cartoon. Don't be this guy. Learn to delegate with clarity, because clarity is kindness, right? No one likes to be micromanaged, but I have found in my professional experience that very few people actually are micromanagers. Where we perceive micromanagement is usually on the employee side, not on the leader side, but it's because the leader has been unclear about follow-up with something. And this is the case that's often happened in my professional experience. The leader has been unclear about what they wanted when something got delegated to me, or I delegated to someone else. That lack of clarity can be misinterpreted. And so if I then, as the leader, delegate a task to a subordinate, and then I follow up with that subordinate asking about the status of it or something like that, I might just be, from a leader standpoint, just trying to make sure that an open loop in my brain is getting closed. I'm just following up on something that I need the piece of information for to put in my report to the city manager or whatever. But the person who I delegated to, if I wasn't clear about what I was expecting, can feel like I'm trying to intrude myself into their execution of whatever it was I asked them to. And so by being clear, for example, is a great example. If I delegate something, I'll try to be clear. Hey, when do I need to hear back from you on this? When do I, or do I need to hear back from you? Am I delegating something to you and just telling you, go do what you think best to make it go away, and I don't ever want to hear about it again, right? That becomes a kind of contract between us. And so if I then come back and say, hey, what's the status of that thing I gave you, right? I've basically given you permission to push back on me and say, well, you didn't want to hear about that. And so I didn't tell you. I dealt with it. Or I didn't deal with it yet, but I will, but you didn't want to hear about it. Okay, well, then that becomes a learning moment for the both of us to either renegotiate the contract about, well, I know I said I didn't want to hear about it, but I really need to put it into my annual report. And so I really need to know how you dealt with it. Or to just, with accountability, say, oh yeah, you're right. I forgot that. My bad. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. Right? That ability to sort of renegotiate delegation will almost always resolve any kind of micromanagement complaint. in my experience, all micromanagement really boils down to the delegation was not clear. And so someone is inappropriately following up, or someone is appropriately following up, but they weren't setting clear expectations about how to follow up. And so be very clear about that as a leader, as a manager. When you delegate something, be very clear. What are you asking the person to do? What does your involvement in that thing mean? And how are they to reply back to you or respond back to you, deliver back results or whatever? A great example is, the difference between, hey, I want you to go fix this problem. Will you go take care of that? Versus, hey, I want you to go investigate a potential solution to this problem. Don't implement it yet. Come back and talk to me, and let's see if it makes sense. Right? Even that level of clarity is kindness to the person who is doing the work. And then they don't feel like you're hovering over their shoulder, telling them how to correct their spelling. So I hope you got a little laugh out of that. Anybody who's ever been micromanaged definitely can appreciate the awkwardness of that cartoon. Okay. All right, let's take this one step further. How do we hone these skills? How do we, both the leadership skills and the management skills, especially when you're busy and you're stretched thin? You don't need a certificate or a title to sort of grow in these things. Most of the time, it just starts with being a little more intentional in the work that you're already doing. And so here's some few ways to sort of develop yourself as a leader and as a manager, no matter your role. The first is really to practice self-reflection. Can you take 5 minutes at the end of every week to ask, hey, what went well this week? What felt really messy? What could I do differently next time? Leadership starts with self-awareness. Then seek feedback. Ask a trusted colleague or a mentor of yours. How did that come across? Or, are there ways I could improve that? Feedback helps you grow faster and lead more effectively. It also opens up a lot of humility in yourself, because it takes a lot of humility to ask for feedback, especially on a sensitive area. And so, make sure that you're asking feedback of someone who doesn't have an axe to grind with your performance. That's why you go to a trusted colleague or a trusted mentor, because mentoring is all about developing the best you that you can be. And then observe other leaders. Watch how other leaders do things. How do they handle meetings? How do they make decisions? How do they deal with challenges? Learn from both the good and the not so good. Leadership really is often caught more than taught. And it really boils down to, we really lead best when we understand how to follow. And so as part of observing other leaders, it's really, having experiences where you've worked under other leaders, both good and bad, and can assess, hey, was that a good leader? Was that a good thing that they did? Was that a bad leader? What was bad about it? Why were they frustrating to work for? Those are the kinds of things that are worth unpacking. Even if it's something that's, from way back in your work career, right? Many of us who are getting, let's say, seasoned in the profession, might have, worked at some point in fast food, and maybe we had good managers and good leaders back then. Maybe we didn't. Well, what made them good? What was so frustrating? What were the things that, drove us crazy as employees? Can we begin to even assess those things, even totally outside our profession now, and leverage them as examples of how to learn and grow from observing what they did? The other way to hone these skills, both of them, management and leadership, is to really build emotional intelligence. No matter how you slice this, we really are talking about how we engage and interact with other people. Even if you are an organization of one employee, you're the only one in the library. You're not the only one in the library. You're the only one on the library payroll. Other people are in the library. And so pay attention to how your words affect them, how your tone affects them. Practice listening more than speaking. That builds trust and it builds influence. And even if you're dealing with just community members always, or city personnel or county personnel, that helps you build influence, and that influence is powerful over time. Then we already mentioned this about being a learner, but commit to learning. Read a leadership book. There's a million of them. Listen to some podcasts. There's a million of those. Have conversations in peer networks like Plan, and engage in those discussions, even if it's just once in a while or once a month, or a little steady growth goes a long way in sort of honing your management skills. The challenge I think we have as managers and leaders is without that steady growth, we will encounter a situation that is, because of its urgency, now requires us to exercise leadership skills that we haven't yet honed, and that becomes problematic, right? You can't anticipate everything, but there's some things you can expect, right? If you supervise people, you can expect at some point in your supervisory career, you're going to have a problem person, and you're going to have to deal with that. And so thinking through and learning how to engage in those kinds of conversations and deal with that situation helps you deal with the situation when it actually happens, instead of getting to the situation and realizing, I don't have any equipping whatsoever to deal with this problem employee or this problem behavior. Those of you who are in my friend circle, we often joke about, stuff they don't teach you in library school, because we're all committed to learning, but they just can't cover it all. We had a tornado and the roof caved in. They didn't teach me that in library school, right? And so, well, fortunately, I had that Amigos disaster preparedness response training, and so I knew how to deal with wet books and things. So, yeah. Commit to learning and grow steadily. It doesn't have to be, you don't need a PhD in leadership to do this well. We're just talking about honing some skills, and you can even anticipate some of the skills that you're going to need or will likely encounter. Then I would encourage you, as I just sort of did, start small, right? You don't need a 5-year plan to become a better leader. Just start small. Start with mentoring a new staff person. Start with proposing a small improvement. Start with being a person who brings calm and focus when things get chaotic. And that one is huge, because truly, as leaders, emotions are contagious, and leadership is a megaphone. That's a great quote from a man named Denver Rourke, who was a Navy SEAL and wrote a great leadership book about the Navy SEALs. And he says, in situations where you really need to lead, emotions are contagious. And so if you're afraid, other people around you are afraid. And leadership is a megaphone. So if you're a little bit afraid, people are terrified who are under your leadership. If you're doubtful, they have a lot of doubts. If you are calm and collected and confident, that is contagious, and leadership is a megaphone. So again, that comes back to self-reflection and self-awareness and understanding, hey, what is my response here? How do I, don't do it falsely. Don't feel like you need to hold it together for the sake of the troops. We're going to talk about that next week when we talk about imposter syndrome, but emotions are contagious and leadership is a megaphone. I found this quote from Simon Sinek to be just so powerful. I don't know if you know who Simon Sinek is, author and speaker, and has done some wonderful TED Talks and wrote some great books on leadership. And leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. Again, my definition, creating environments where other people can be successful. And then I threw in the Jack Welch quote there about great managers, simplify the complex. And then these 3 pictures are the Schleicher County Public Library, which just opened their new library facility Schleicher County. The library is in El Dorado. If you don't know where El Dorado is, it's south of San Angelo. And pictured in the upper left there is the library director, Michelle. She had a vision for a new library for their community. And it took years. It was a very complex project. It took years of effort. And she's pictured there inside one of these little cubbies in the children's area that they had a vision for creating these little nooks with lights that kids could sit in and read. And so the picture in the bottom left there is a bunch of community members in the nooks when the library opened. And the picture on the right is the first day of their summer reading program in their brand new library space. They had so many people, they blew the walls out, basically. So just, great managers simplify the complex. This is an incredibly complex project that took years of effort. They didn't have any money. She didn't have any staff. But she had a vision and she helped people catch that vision and then used her influence in the community to sort of develop funding and fundraising, and now they have a new library and it's amazing. So a fantastic example. Congratulations to Michelle for their new library. It really is a beautiful space. If you're ever in El Dorado, stop in and say hello. Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of stuff today. We've covered definitions, we've covered differences, we've covered real life scenarios, and the challenges of doing it all sort of in small libraries. Hopefully, I think you've seen that leadership and management aren't opposites; they're partners, and both are essential to really making your library stronger, to making your library more responsive. And more rooted in your community. You don't have to have a big dream like Michelle had, or you don't have to have a big budget, thank goodness, because none of us do, but you do have influence and you have insight and you have opportunity and you have those things every day. And so lead with purpose and manage with care are the best words of advice I can give you. So whether you're setting vision or you're shelving books, whether you're fixing the printer or forming some new partnership in your community, just remember day in and day out, you are shaping the future of your library, and that matters. Your work matters. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I want to have some discussion. We got lots of time for questions, but I'll start with just an open-ended question. And you all can feel free to, if you want to, you can type it into the chat, or if you want to pop on your microphone, turn on your camera and ask it directly, you can do that. But my first question to you all, open-ended, is what's your takeaway? You've sat through this whole thing, hopefully paid attention, hopefully laughed at my Star Wars picture. By the way, did I mention that my model for managing, and let me go back to it. If you close your eyes and you squint, it looks a lot like the Death Star. Okay, anyway. All right, what's your takeaway today? You listen to this, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with this information?
Hey, Eddie.
Hey, Justin.
So I've done tons of these leadership alt exams and a variety of other things, but one of my biggest issues, and you kind of talked about it at the beginning, is that I don't know, it feels more like theory than like the more actionable approaches. So thank you for kind of pointing that out, because that's something I've been thinking about recently. But I had a question for you.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit on the younger side, according to some people I know, and a lot of my staff happen to be maybe a generation or two older than me. So sometimes that dynamic is a little awkward. So do you have any tips on like mentoring or leading individuals that are of the older generation than yourself?
Yeah, so the best thing I could maybe advice, if you call it that, I could give you is be very clear about whether you're mentoring them, right? It's about esteem and mutual respect, or you're coaching them, which is about taking proven techniques and helping the performance improve. And so clarity on that line will help alleviate a lot of the misinterpretation, right? Because mentoring is about you sharing wisdom and developing them as an individual. That might be a hard message to swallow if they're twice your age and have twice your experience and 9 times your wisdom, right? And so just clarify, hey, I don't need to be your mentor, but let me be your coach, right? And that's where you can bring in, newness or more recent, professional advances or things that are proven, like, hey, I just finished in library school last week, and now they're teaching
more than a week ago.
Yeah, I know, but now they're teaching these new techniques, which, are better and yield better results. And here's why, right? That's coaching. And that's a different approach. And again, I would just say, clarifying that is really helpful so that they're not misunderstanding. Are you trying to mentor me? Like young whippersnapper, why don't you come back when you're not wet behind the ears, right? No, this is about, hey, I have more recent knowledge and technique that is proven to work. And so I'm going to come at this as coach. The other thing too is to just recognize that, in your particular role, you're the manager, you're the leader. And so you can put the organizational well-being, you can put on your manager hat and say, well, the organizational goals are more important here. And I know you think you know best about how to run the library, but I'm the one responsible for running it. And so here's how here are the operational goals we need to achieve. Let's talk about how we can best do that. But at the end of the day, the organizational goals has to win out. Yeah. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about actually having some physical hats made? Because that was running through my mind earlier. That way there's a visual shift for both people, in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
he's got his leadership hat on today.
What would the leadership hat be?
It would just be like a hat that says leadership on it,
okay.
Manager.
Right. Would the manager hat be like a pointy one? I don't know. Yeah, I think that's why I felt like I needed to talk about the sort of nuance between those 3 roles, because I think they get very blurry, especially in small organizations, and especially in a team like yours where we've all worked together for years and years and years, right? And so we all kind of know each other. We all kind of have been together for a long time, and those lines get blurry, and it's very easy to misinterpret. Hey, you're coming at me today with something that you need to address as manager, and I'm expecting you to be coaching me, or I'm expecting you to be mentoring me. And that can feel very jarring.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if that helps you, but I like the idea of hats, but I'd do something cool, stylish, like.
Thanks, Eddie.
Yeah. Okay. Lots of comments here. Let me read these a little bit. Eric, yes, always learn something new. Excellent. Way to lead out there. Eric and I went to Tall Texans together a million years ago. It wasn't a million, but it felt like a million. Paige, yeah, first time direct supervisor. Yeah. The self-reflection part, right? And I would say, one of the things I've learned over the years as a manager of people and operating organizations, big and small, is that your emotions are absolutely contagious. And so if you feel doubtful, then that is amplified out 10 times out to your team. If you feel confident, that's amplified out 10 times to your team. And so, I don't know if I'm also a Star Trek fan. I don't know if you guys are Star Trek fans, but there's a great episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where Captain Picard and the Doctor have these little chips planted in their brain, and they can hear each other's thoughts. And so they're at a decision point, and the captain makes a decision, and they go with it. And then the Doctor knows that he just made that up. Like he didn't have any idea what the right decision was, but he just decided. And so she calls him on it. She's like, you don't have any idea what you're doing. Is that the way it always is? And he's like, no, but sometimes you have to that your indecision is amplified. So you have to just decide, I have to be decisive, even when I'm not entirely sure which is the right decision. Anyway, we'll talk more about that next week, because we're going to talk in our session next Thursday about imposter syndrome, something I am deeply familiar with. So, okay, back to the comments. Appreciate the distinction between coach and mentor and manager. Yep. Heading off micromanagement with clarity. Oh, great. Speaking of hats, I can put on half of this. Hurley. Get always making sure you're clear. With your with your hat. Am I the supervisor today, or my wife is a teacher, and she'll sometimes say things to me at the end of the day, and I'll be like, "Are you still wearing the teacher hat?" Because that felt like a little bit like you were telling me to, put a bubble in my mouth. So, that clarity is kindness. Always good. Other questions? Anyone else have a question? No other questions? Jeffrey, did I miss any in the chat? I'm kind of scrolling back up now.
No, I think you got everything in the chat.
Yeah.
You were good to go. And by the way, I love your Star Wars references. I have to say that.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Me being a big fan of it as well, too. I got a kick out of it.
I have embraced my nerdiness. It's okay.
It's way okay.
Yeah. I've come to be at peace about that. One of the best things about working in the library field is you're surrounded by other nerds. So, all right. Well, last call on questions, and we'll wrap up. We'll send you all to lunch early.
All righty, folks. Well, thank you very much for attending our training. Eddie, thank you very much for your presentation. It was awesome. Thank you very much, and we appreciate you very much for helping us out. My pleasure. All righty, everyone. I will have the recordings out to you as soon as possible. I got 3 to do, but I will get them all out to you here pretty soon. So just stand by for those, as well as a little survey that I'll send out. And everyone have a great day. Enjoy your holiday tomorrow, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. I see some other familiar faces in there. Carrie was also in our Tall Texans class years